Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Dana. I'm a product manager at PingID. I'm focused on strong authentication and mobile, and I'm based off of Israel. During today's masterclass, I will highlight a few enhancements that we introduced during this past year. I will talk about PingID offline MFA and how it helps to overcome one of the main concerns that organizations have with SaaS when it comes to user authentication. I will highlight PingID offering when it comes to Windows login for the workforce. And then I will discuss PingID offering in the PingID SDK as part of the PingID SDK enhancements in the space of customer identity and access management. So let's start with the PingID offline MFA. Cloud-delivered MFA is strongly tied to internet connectivity, obviously. During a regular user login, the user provides his username and password, or without a password, it doesn't really matter to us. And then the MFA flow kicks in the cloud, and the user is approved and can securely be authenticated. When there is no internet connection, whether it's because the accessing device, the device from which the user is accessing, has no network connection, or if the cloud service is unavailable, or PingID is unavailable, or any other reasons, the admin can either block the user or bypass the MFA and allow the user to log in, but with a lower level of certainty about the user identity. Enterprises must keep their operations going at all times. When MFA is embedded in many critical use cases, it must comply with the same availability standards. But what about those cases when PingID service is unreachable? The most common reason is, again, no network connection on the accessing device, for example, if the user is in an airplane. But other examples can be cloud service unavailability, communication issues between PingID and PingFed, misconfigurations of proxy or firewall or whatever. So this is the problem, and the solution that we provide now is in case there is no network connectivity, we provide the admin with the opportunity to allow users to authenticate offline, but to be authenticated with PingID, with the MFA. So there are a few goals for that. The first one is to enable PingID customers to continue to authenticate users even when the cloud service is out of reach, and to have continuous operations. To allow the customers to ensure protected services using PingID continue to be available and secure for the customers. It allows to leverage PingID MFA solution even to Windows login. And in the Windows login, as I will show afterwards, the not heavy network connection is really common. It allows to block a possible attack vector on the organization by blocking PingID, and it allows a familiar user experience for the user for both online and offline authentication. So what is PingID offline MFA? So since it's part of PingID, obviously it's a cloud-first SaaS system. However, we added the ability to occasionally authenticate locally if needed. And by doing so, we allow the organizations to mitigate one of the main concerns that organizations have when they come to assess MFA in the cloud. And it is not an on-prem solution. It cannot replace PingID cloud service. Currently, the offline MFA supports two main integrations. One is the Windows login, and the other is the PingID PingFed integration in the cases of Web SSO and VPN Radius login. And I will elaborate a little bit about both of them. So the first one that I will talk about is the Windows login offline use case. And in this case, it's very common for a user to be without a network connection. So it could be, for example, if the user is on an airplane, or perhaps he's in his basement and there is no good network connection. He can be walking into an internet cafe or to a lobby of a hotel, and he didn't establish a network connection yet. So this is very common, and in this case, obviously, there cannot be any connection to ping1 where PingID resides. So in this case, the offline MFA can allow the user to securely log in and get access to internet connection and to company resources. I would like to show you a short demo now about the offline MFA for Windows login. I will start with an online flow, a regular online flow, just for those of you who are not familiar with the way we integrate with Windows login, and then we'll see the offline. And you can see here that this is a mobile app. The user has downloaded and installed PingID mobile app, and he trusted his device with the organization. In the online login, we can see here that this is the Windows machine. The user logs in. He receives a push to his mobile device. We open an embedded browser, and once the user approves it, only then he's logged in to his Windows machine. That was easy enough, just one push and the user logs in. Now let's look at the offline flow. So in this case, again, the user logs in, but there is no network connection. So in the embedded browser, you'll see here that instead of presenting the user with the authenticating spinner that we saw, he receives the options with which he can authenticate. So in this case, the user has 3 trusted mobile devices, so he can choose any one of them in order to perform the authentication. Once he chooses the one that he wants to use, he gets a QR code, and now he needs to go to his mobile app, same mobile app as for the online login. He goes to the sidebar, manual authentication, and then he should scan the QR code. And you can see here that for security reasons, he should also put fingerprint in order to even see the QR code, and that's it's configurable by the organization. Once he puts his fingerprint, he can scan the QR code, and then he gets a one-time authentication code, which in turn he types in the Windows machine, and that's it. He's logged in, and he can continue doing his job even though he wasn't connected to the network. So you can see that even though the solution, the user experience is not exactly the same, and the user did have to go through some additional clicks, his experience is quite similar. He uses the same mobile app for both online and offline authentication. He can see all of his trusted devices, so it's quite a good experience for him. So let's see what happens. This is a high-level diagram, and we'll see here that during the online flow, when the user logs into his Windows machine, there is an MFA request that is sent to the PingID cloud. Then a challenge is sent to the user mobile device, and the user action is sent back to PingID and the authentication response is sent back to the user login in order to allow him to log in. And now we added to this authentication response a PKI encrypted user devices list, and that devices list is saved in the local user registry. So that's an online login. So we just added to the regular online flow this last part of saving the user's devices. Now during an offline flow, when there is no connectivity to the network, we get the user devices from the local registry, and then we start the offline authentication screen with all of the user's devices as we saw in the demo. So this was the first integration, the first use case for the offline MFA when we integrate with Windows login. Now, before I talk about the next use case, which is PingID PingFed integration and the WebSSO and VPN radius login, I want to really quickly provide just this one slide about PingFed for those of you who are not familiar. I'm definitely not going to go over all of it. I will just say that PingFederate allows companies to authenticate users and provide SSO across all of the organization's application. It's an on-prem authentication authority that can manage the full user lifecycle, whether it's authentication, consent, and whatever. And as you can see here, PingID can be integrated with PingFed in order to provide stronger authentication for the users and for the organization resources. So this is really a very high level of PingFed, just to get you into the context. So when we integrate PingID with PingFederate in order to provide stronger authentication and MFA capabilities, and since PingFed is on-prem and PingID is in the cloud, we might have a situation where connectivity will be not available. And this is very scarce and it's not happening often. However, we do need to deal with that possibility, that PingID is unavailable. And basically the offline MFA deals with that as well. So let's see a short demo about that, and you'll see that the user experience is exactly the same, apart for the accessing device. In the first case, the accessing device was a Windows machine. In this case, it's the user is trying to log into a resource. It's a web resource. So we can see here first an online login. This is actually a PingFed authentication page. The user in this case provides his username and password. However, again, for the MFA to kick in, we don't really need the password, just the username. And when the user authenticates, he is securely logged in and can continue his job. And now, in case there is no connectivity to the cloud service or the firewall configurations is off or whatever, when the user tries to log in and there is no network connection to Ping1, you can see again the same flow. He's presented with two devices. In this case, maybe he deleted one, he unpaired one device. And once he chooses that device, he needs to open his mobile app, go to the sidebar, click manual authentication. Again, he puts his fingerprint just for extra security. And he scans his QR code, same behavior, types in the authentication code, and that's it. He's logged in, he has access to all the organization resources. And this technical solution is basically very similar, so we can see here again the online flow. When the user logs in, PingFederate redirects the MFA request to PingID. Then we have all of the challenge and the user action, and PingID sends the authentication response through PingFed to the user, and with it we send an encrypted user devices list. And this is the device is saved in the organization on-prem directory. The organization can use the same directory as they normally do, or they can have a dedicated directory just for this purpose. In the offline flow, again, as we saw before, we get the user device information and we kick in the offline flow, very similar to what we saw before. So I showed you the integration both with Windows login and with the PingID PingFed integration for WebSSO and VPN Radius login. And even though we talk about very different use cases, one is very common, the other is scarce, very different integrations, we have the same solution and the same user experience across integrations. So we have a lot of benefits from this solution. First of all, PingID is actually now a hybrid MFA solution, and we provide the same offline MFA solution as the organization's main online solution. So the organization doesn't have to go and purchase a different solution just for the offline use case. They can leverage the same online solution for both integrations. And they can have both, they can enjoy both all the benefits of the cloud service and have this on-prem component just in case they need it. We have a holistic MFA solution across integrations, so the user has the same experience, the same solution for many different integrations, both for machine and mobile login. And everything can be done with the same mobile application. So again, the user doesn't have to have a different application for online and offline login. This offline solution doesn't require any pre-registration, so the user doesn't have to go and actively set a device. He doesn't have to remember to delete it and to update it if he changes the device. This is especially useful in case, this is especially relevant when we're talking about the PingID, PingFed integration, where the solution is not common, so the user might register a device and forget all about it, and then 6 months after he needs to use it and he forgot all about that device. So no need for that here. Every time the user authenticates online, all of his devices are updated on-prem. So no need to do anything, and obviously the help desk overhead is reduced due to that, because no need for the user to call ad hoc to the help desk asking them to bypass the user or delete their device or whatever. As we saw, the user has a familiar user experience, so both a familiar user experience across different integrations for offline login, as well as familiar user experience for online and offline login. And again, as we saw in the demo, if the user has more than one trusted mobile app, he can use any one of them whenever he wishes. He doesn't have to be tied to one device in order to do the offline authentication. What's coming ahead? So we are going to add additional authentication devices. We will add desktop app and SMS as alternative authentication options for this offline MFA. And we are going to add support for SSH integration for the offline use cases. So this was the first enhancement that I wanted to share with you. The second one is Windows login for the workforce. So up until recently, we recommended the integration we had with Windows login for server and RDP use case. Recently, we added two important pieces of the puzzle. First is the offline MFA that I just talked about, and the second is reduced token permissions to be installed on the end user's machines. And this allowed us to extend the offering for all of the employees and workforce use case, because we are now offering both server and end user machines MFA capabilities, as well as online and offline authentication. Okay. So this first part that I talked about is really about the enterprise identity and access management space. And now I want to go over Ping customer identity and access management space, and the offering that we have here in the form of PingID SDK and what we did here in the last year. But before I do that, I want to recap what we had last year. So last year during CIS in Chicago, I had a MasterClass about the new PingID mobile SDK that we just released. And I talked about how the organization can embed multi-factor authentication in the organization's own mobile app. And I do think it's important to take these few minutes to remember what are the main flows there. So PingID provides MFA solution for all of the users' population. So for the enterprise use case, we have the PingID mobile app, which is our best authentication method. The mobile app, the PingID mobile app, is a standalone app. It can be easily downloaded and installed and paired for the user. It is co-branded to some extent and doesn't require any development from the organization side, just some configuration. For the customer use case, we have the PingID Mobile SDK. The PingID Mobile SDK is a component that the organization embeds within the organization's own mobile app in order to get MFA and transaction approval capabilities. So all the brands, all the logic, all the flows obviously are of the organization itself. And obviously because of that, it requires some development. I will go over some main flows that we introduced last year, just so we remember. The first one is mobile app login. So once the user installed the organization mobile app, which embedded PingID mobile SDK in it, and after he registered his device, he trusted his device to the service, whenever he logs in, from his perspective, he just logs in as he normally did, whether it's with user and password, whether it's just with fingerprint, depending on the security and the business logic of the organization. Once he did that, he's logged in and he just can do whatever he wanted to do. However, behind the scenes, the device is being authorized with PingID SDK server for extra security. So we have basically seamless MFA without the user even knowing about it. The second use case is web-based login, and in this case, basically the mobile app becomes a sort of authenticator. So the mobile app, again, in this case, is embedded with PingID mobile SDK. The user has trusted it, so whenever he logs into the website of the mobile, he receives a push. He receives a push to his mobile app, the authenticator, and only once he approves it, he can log in. And again, in this case, you can see here that Touch ID can be implemented. Again, the organization can do whatever it wishes to do. Another use case is transaction approval. So whenever the user wants to perform a high level or high risk transaction, he will receive a push notification to his mobile app. The push notification can also include details about the transaction that the user is trying to do. And only once the user approves it, the transaction is actually processed and approved. A transaction can be anything from purchasing to password reset or even user identification in order to talk to a customer representative. Another flow is the authorizing of a primary device. We support two options, automatic and manual authorization. The automatic registration of a new device, and we're talking about the first device here. The user, after he puts his credentials, username and password, he's asked one question: do you want to trust this device? And if he says yes, that's it. From his perspective, he completed the registration. However, behind the scenes, we create trust between PingID SDK server and the mobile app. So from the user experience, he doesn't have to do anything, but behind the scenes, again, the trust is created. And the manual authentication, after the user is asked if he wants to trust the device, he needs to type in an activation code that he obtained in advance. And the organization can provide the user with this activation code in whatever way they wish. They can put it in the invoice, they can send it in an SMS, they can ask the user to go into the branch in order to get it. It's really depends on the business logic. So you can see that while the automatic authorization leans a little bit more toward customer experience, the manual authorization leans a little bit more toward security. However, in both cases, it's only one or two steps in order to get the device registered. And the last thing that I want to remind us all is about the notion of network of trusted devices. So once the user trusted his first and primary device, that device is his authenticator, and that device is used in order to add additional trusted devices, in order to block suspicious devices. The user can self-manage all of his devices, so he can delete devices, he can block a device that he lost or has been compromised. He can do many activities, again, based on the organization business logic. So that was last year. Now let's talk about what we did since then. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about legacy authentication methods. So while we at Ping believe that the mobile application is the best authentication method, we do understand that the legacy authentication methods are a common alternative to the mobile application. And in addition, it can provide a wider range of authentication types for the user to have in his network of trusted devices. So instead of only have multiple mobile devices as the user's authenticators, he can have additional legacy authentication methods such as SMS and email. Some users may not even have a smartphone, or they don't want to install your mobile app and they want to use the old authentication methods. These legacy authentication methods are easier for some users to adopt, and it can be a segue to migrate users to the next phase or to a more modern authentication methods in the future, and to increase the adoption rate of MFA across the customer range. And the last thing is that really this is basic security and it's better than nothing. So what we introduced so far is email and SMS as alternative authentication methods, and we are going to introduce voice OTP during the next quarter until end of Q3. All of these authentication methods are fully customizable, so the text is whatever the organization wish to include in it. They are localized based on the accessing device locale. They support all the use cases that I showed you before, so the transaction approval, the web and app login and whatever. And they are added to the network of trusted devices. So again, the user can self-manage these devices as well. He can pair and unpair these devices, etc. I want to show you a short demo about this. For this demo, I will use our own sample app that we provide to the developers as part of the PingID SDK kit that is available. So you have to excuse the very basic UI. So in this case, the user doesn't have the mobile app, and we can see that once the user tries to log into the website, he receives a push notification. He receives an SMS to his mobile app, and once he goes into the message, he types in the OTP that he got, and he can log in. And you can see here that the message is the text is whatever Moderna wanted to call it. Moderna, that's the name of our application. In some cases, in some countries, you can even change the sender ID. In the United States, you cannot, but in some other countries, you can. Okay, so this was the first enhancement that we introduced in the PingID SDK. Before I talk about the second one, I want to give a very high-level solution diagram of how of the architecture of the PingID SDK. So we have PingID SDK server that communicates with the mobile app that includes the PingID SDK, the mobile SDK inside it, and the customer server. And the business app and the mobile app communicates with the customer server as well. So that was the original solution diagram that we had. So now I would like to talk about PingID SDK integration with pingfederate. So what we wanted to do is to reduce the development effort that is needed from the organization when they wish to integrate PingID capabilities for MFA, for MFA and transaction approval capabilities. And we also wanted to allow customers of PingFed, existing customers of PingFed, to leverage this existing infrastructure in order to embed the MFA capabilities easily. And obviously by doing so, to allow the organizations a shorter implementation time of the MFA. So now what we have on top of the original architecture is the option for the organizations to just take PingFed as their customer server. So basically, PingFed replaces the need to develop a customer server for those use cases that we support. And while obviously the mobile application development is still needed, we can just, the customer can just implement PingID SDK adapter into PingFed as part of PingFed chain of authentication, and that's it. So as part of PingID SDK integration with pingfederate, we provide an out-of-box integration with pingfederate in the form of a PingID SDK adapter that supports several use cases for PingID SDK. It has a flexible configuration for the admin because we understand that that the business logic of different organizations can be different. It includes and it supports all of the multiple authentication methods that we have, so whether it's the mobile SDK or the SMS and email and soon to be voice. We provide customizable authentication screens so they can be used. We updated the documentation, obviously. The Moderna developers sample app was updated to include this integration. And another very important component is that is added is the possibility to automatically provision and deprovision users, and to even also for the legacy authentication methods to pair these methods behind the scenes. So we have a customer that automatically provisioned all of his users to have email as one default backup authentication method, for example. So I talked about two main enhancements that we introduced to the PingID SDK, which were the alternate authentication methods and the integration with PingFed. I want to quickly go over additional enhancements. The first one is SMS sub-accounts. This enhancement can be useful in a case where the organization wishes to send the SMS messages from a local number and not from Ping US number. And it can also be useful in a case where the organization has multiple applications and they wish each application to have its own phone number and not send all of the SMSs to the different applications from the same number. The next thing is registration enhancements that we introduced. First one is push and pushless options. So this use case is useful for a case where the organization doesn't support the fallback OTP option that we provide in case the authenticating device is offline. In this case, if the user registers his device while he's in pushless mode, for whatever reason that would be, he will never be able to authenticate, because every time that he wishes to authenticate the website, a push is sent to his mobile device, but he's in pushless mode, so he will be stuck. So now we allow the organization, if they don't want to support pushless mode during authentication, to disallow it in the registration process. The second granularity that we provided here is the Government User Authorization Authority. So we have a customer that wishes to authorize their users and identify them using a government third-party authority. So they want for each device that the user registers, whether it's the first one or any other device, to authorize and verify the user against this government service. So they don't want the primary device to be the one to authorize the other devices. They want every device to be authorized by this government authority. We also refreshed the documentation side, both for the developers and for the admin. And obviously that's not all that we did. Last slide before we go to Q&A is what's ahead in the PingID SDK roadmap. So first of all, we will add the voice OTP, as I said. We are going to add additional use cases for the integration with Ping Federate. We will add device identification across applications. So this is useful for a case where, again, the organization has many applications and they wish the trust to be in the device level and not in the application level. So to allow a second and third application to enjoy the trust that was created with the first one. And we are going to add adaptive authentication to PingID SDK as well. So this was all that I had to share with you, and we can go to questions.